What's the first thing you should make as a woodworker? Boxes. Boxes are a fundamental part of woodworking. If you can master them as a beginning, you'll be on your way to being an advanced woodworker. Today, we're gonna make a simple box out of plywood. You can use it for keepsake items or to give it to your loved ones. The first thing we're gonna do today is cut some grooves in the plywood. You'll see later why these grooves are important. To cut the groove in the wood, we have to set up our table saw correctly. And so we're gonna put the groove 1/4 inch from the top and 1/4 inch deep. And so what we need to do is we need to set our blade at 1/4 inch. And there's a couple ways you can do that. You can do it with setup blocks, put it here and you wind it down till it's flush with the setup block. Or you can do the old school way is use your tape measure. It's not quite as accurate, but it'll get you there. We're also gonna set the fence 1/4 inch away from the inside of the blade. And so again, you could use your setup block like that. Make sure you lock your fence down. Most important, you have your PPE, your safety glasses, and your mask. When you're working with plywood, there's binders and glue in the plywood that really are irritants, so I recommend using a mask when you're cutting plywood, cutting and sanding it. So we have our first groove here. It's 1/8 of an inch, the width of the blade. So we're gonna have to move the fence again because we wanna be able to fit 1/4 inch piece of plywood in this groove. I like to use the ruler on the table saw because I know where I'm starting. And so I'm just gonna add 1/4 inch to this ruler here. The width of this groove really depends on the thickness of plywood we're gonna use for the top and for the bottom. I like to use a thicker plywood on the bottom because it'll have all the weight in the box. And then I like a thinner one on top so that when you go to pull the top off, it's easily removed. I wanted all 4 sides to be the same length. You can do any length you want. You can do a rectangle, you can do a square. If you wanna get fancy, you can do an octagon. Whatever you like. I recommend as a beginner, you just keep it simple. You have all your boards the same length, and then that way, when you're going through measurements and fitting things, it's much easier. So next up, we're gonna join the 4 boards, and how we're gonna do that today is miter joints. So first thing I do, I bring my saw to the top level. Then I get my tool, this is an angle finder. Next up is laying out your lines for your miters. You get yourself a combination square. It'll have a 45 degree on it. You place the 45 on the edge of the plywood, and then you draw your line. Ending my miter. Really why you need a miter gauge is just a stable place that'll hold your project square to the blade. The key to miter joints is just taking off little bits at a time until you get to your mark line. My corner is right at the cut line, and then we'll take a pass. Then we'll take another pass and bring it just a little bit closer. Getting quite a bit of tear out. It's all good though. There's one side of our miter joint. Oh, I'm getting a lot of tear out. It's not the best plywood. I'm gonna put a piece of blue tape. Should help me a little bit with the plywood tear out. It should be good to go. Definitely a little better. The higher tooth blade you use, the less tear out you'll get. One of the ways you can check your miters is you lay them down flat, all on the same line, put a piece of blue tape along the back. You flip it over, make sure everything's still even, and then you fold it together like this. And then you can tip it down. If you really want, take a piece of blue tape and use that to close up your last joint, just to give yourself an idea of what it's gonna look like. So we need to find out the area of the inside bottom so we can measure it out, obviously, but also we cut the grooves in, right? And so if we know the depth of our groove, our depth, like you saw us cut, is 1/4 inch. We have to add 1/4 inch to the width and the depth. 6 9/16. Have a bottom. set them all up. I'm gonna make sure they're all the right direction. Make sure they're all tightly against each other, snugly, whatever word you want to use. Flip it over. Do a quick dry fit just to double check again. Make sure everything fits correctly. And then we can move on to the glue up. For this glue up, I'm going to use quick and thick just to save some time. I recommend a little glue up tray and a little glue brush. You don't need a ton of glue. The problem with doing that is you get tons of squeeze out. A little bit of squeeze out's fine, but you get tons and then it leaves stains on the wood and it's just problematic for when you decide to finish it, if you decide to finish it. Just gonna use a little tiny bit of glue on the groove, but only on the top and bottom groove of the first time I put the board in. You don't want too much glue in here, a little bit's fine. It's just really to secure your board. So if you see squeeze out before you close the box, now's the time to get what you can. Use the tape as a really tight clamp. A couple of miters had some gaps, and so I'm just closing those gaps. You can use a screwdriver, or this is called a burnisher. What's important is that it's smooth and there's no coat on it. Pretty good. There we go. The glue's all dried. Now we have to decide how big the lid is gonna be on the box. For me, I think the lid needs to be about probably 1.5 inches. General cut line to work from. So we need to do a couple things. One, we need to set our blade high enough to cut through the plywood, but not too high because we don't want to get too much tear out. And then two, we want to set it up where our line is. And so for visuals, I'll kind of help set that up. And we want to make sure we include the thickness of the blade, which is called a kerf. And so always when you draw a line, you have to decide, do I want the blade to cut on this side of the kerf or this side of the kerf or on the kerf? And for today, because how I made the measurement, we're gonna set the blade up to cut exactly in the middle of the kerf. And I move it all the way to the blade to see where the blade's gonna hit. And then I lock down my table saw. So next, I wanna bring the blade up to the height I want. We did our first cut. Now we're gonna rotate to the other side of the box. On the last cut, I want to be cautious to push on this because it's only hanging on by a little bit. And so what I like to do is actually take a piece of tape and tape over this to keep it together. Because otherwise, once you cut it loose, it's gonna drift away, and we don't want that. Here we go. So there you go. Now we have a lid. You have a couple options with attaching the lid. You can do hinges, where you attach it either on the inside or the outside. The other option is you can attach a lip inside the lid, or you can even put a lip inside the main box. And I'm gonna use some MDF cardstock. I'm gonna cut little strips and attach them to the lid. 6.5 by 6.5. I'm gonna be using super glue. I recommend you get a 2-part super glue. As a woodworker, super glue is a super helpful tool. A little chamfer on the edges just so it slides into the box better. You can use a little mini block plane. You can use a chisel, or you can even use sandpaper and sand the edges. If you learned something from this video, give us a like and subscribe. It really helps us out. We got all the edges of our lid chamfered. Looks pretty good. Feels pretty natural. Goes right on. I want to add a little handle to the top to make it easier to take it off. Again, you could do anything you want, but I like to go into my scrap bin and kind of see what small parts I have. And I originally thought it would be nice to put a little bow tie as a handle, but unfortunately they're a little too thin. Another option is I could use a full block of wood. I don't mind that, it's actually okay. But I wanted to do something a little fancier, and you'll see at the end why. And this is an offcut of a project I just did recently, and I thought it had a pretty cool look, especially for the end use of this box. I have a couple quick things I want to do with this box, and then we're finished. I have an 1/8 inch roundover bit in this palm router. I'm just gonna run along the edges of the top of the lid and then the inside of the box, just to soften it up a little bit. Sand with the grain. For the finish, I'm gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna be using paste wax. I like that it keeps the wood looking its fresh color. Make sure before you finish, you wipe off, and I use a compressor to spray out all the sawdust from it. Make sure if you don't have paste wax in your shop, you get some. It has so many different uses, not even just as a finish. Use it on your tools to take care of them, use it on your jigs, and it's fairly affordable. And there you have it. A simple plywood box. I really believe a box is the first thing every beginner woodworker should make. All you need is a little plywood, some patience. It's not perfect, and it shouldn't be. You should use cheap materials for your first builds. Make lots of mistakes and learn from them. But it still works, and I'm happy with it. I hope you learned something today, and we hope to see you on the next build. What is that?